Welcome to my YouTube channel, Tony Style Motivation. This isn't just another motivational page, this is a wake-up call. Here, we don't sugarcoat, we don't play small, we break cycles, we rewrite mindsets, and we take back our power one truth at a time. If you're tired of chasing people who don't value you, if you're done being stuck in the same patterns, if you're ready to become the strongest, most unshakable version of you, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button because the real shift. It starts now. You know what's wild? The message that hits the hardest is the one you never send. You spend days, sometimes weeks, drafting it in your head. Paragraphs, all the things you wish you could say, all the truth you want them to hear, the anger, the confusion, the heartbreak, the need to be understood. And you hold on to this idea that maybe, if you just explain it the right way, they'll finally get it. They'll finally see you, but deep down you already know they won't, because the avoidant doesn't respond to your words. They respond to your energy, and when your energy is still grasping, still hoping, still pleading to be seen, they feel it. They read it. And as long as you're in that place, they know they still have space in your mind, in your heart, in your nervous system. So what shakes them, what rattles them, is when you stop sending the message altogether, when you don't text, when you don't explain, when you don't fight for understanding anymore, because the second you do that, you flip the power dynamic. Suddenly the energy shifts. You're no longer orbiting them. You're not chasing closure. You're not playing the emotional hide and seek game they've mastered. You're just done, and not in a bitter, cold way, not in a watch me move on performance, but in a grounded, soul-deep kind of done, the kind that says, I'm not sending anything, because I have nothing left to prove. That unsent message, it's louder than words because it speaks volumes about where you now stand. It tells them, I'm not trying to reach you anymore. I've reached myself. And here's the truth: avoidants don't fear your messages. They don't fear your emotional outbursts. They're used to that. They expect it. They even feel safe when you're emotional because it keeps them in control. But when you say nothing, when there's no noise, no drama, no final speech, now they are the ones wondering, what happened? Where did you go? Why aren't you trying anymore? Because that's when it gets real. That's when they start realizing you were never trying to control them. You were trying to connect. You were trying to be real in a world they kept at arm's length, but now the silence is louder than anything you could have typed. Because silence isn't empty. Silence is full of decisions. It's full of strength. It's full of self-respect. You didn't stay quiet because you had nothing to say. You stayed quiet because they weren't worthy of the energy it took to say it. There's a moment, if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about, where you draft the message, you pour your heart into it, and then you delete it. You look at it one last time, and you realize it's not worth it, because you don't need to be understood by someone who refuses to see you. You don't need closure from someone who ran from conversations. You don't need to express yourself to someone who already made the decision to turn away. And in that moment, when you delete the message and walk away, you rise, because now you're no longer waiting for their response. You're responding to you. That's the turning point, and make no mistake, that's silence. It shakes the avoidant more than 1,000 messages ever could, because for the first time, they're not sure what you're thinking. They can't read you. They can't use your words to distance themselves. They're left in the space they created, and it doesn't feel as safe anymore. You didn't ghost them. You grew past them. The unsent message is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's emotional maturity. It's you saying, I don't need to scream my worth anymore. I live it now. And that's the message they'll hear every time they sit in silence, wondering why your voice is no longer echoing through their life. Because in the end, the message that hit the hardest is the one that never had to be spoken. There's a moment when everything inside of you wants to speak, not to scream, not to plead, not to beg, but to be heard. And the truth is, for a long time you weren't speaking from power. You were speaking from pain, from abandonment, from not feeling seen. You were trying to explain your worth to someone who refused to look, trying to build a bridge to someone who kept burning it. You weren't communicating, you were bleeding, and you thought that if you could just say it the right way, if you could just be calm enough, real enough, soft enough they'd hear you, they'd see you, they'd choose you, but they didn't, because someone with a guarded heart doesn't hear love as love. They hear it as pressure, as threat, as something they need to escape from. So what do you do with all that pain? What do you do when your truth keeps hitting a wall? When your vulnerability keeps bouncing off silence? There comes a point. If you're growing, you reach it. It's not loud. It doesn't come with a breakdown. It comes quietly, like clarity, like peace. That's the moment you stop speaking to be heard and start standing in who you are. You stop trying to force understanding, and you just decide, not from anger, but from alignment, not from fear, but from freedom. You finally realize this isn't about getting them to understand. This is about you understanding that you are not here to carry the emotional weight of someone who keeps dodging their own. That you are not responsible for proving your worth to someone who isn't even available to themselves, and that shift, that is power, because when you speak from pain, it's full of need, it's full of urgency. It says, please meet me here. Please choose me. But when you speak from power, the energy is different. Now you're saying, I've already chosen myself, and that's enough. You speak not to convince, but to declare to yourself, to the universe, to your spirit, and that moment, that's when the avoidant feels it, not because you yelled, not because you chased, but because your energy no longer seeks validation. You've moved from reaction to revelation, and you're not asking to be accepted anymore. You've already accepted you. That is what rattles them, because for the first time they feel the absence of your need. Avoidants are used to being the one with the emotional upper hand. They're used to others adjusting, shrinking, begging, hoping. But when you stand tall in silence, when you look at that relationship dynamic and say, this no longer feeds me, they feel it. Because now they're no longer in control of your peace. You've reclaimed it. And you might say just a few words, or maybe none at all. Your body, your energy, your boundaries, they speak volumes. You're no longer engaging with the drama. You're no longer entertaining potential. You're no longer asking someone emotionally unavailable to love you in a way they never learned how to give. You're done asking for scraps, because the feast is within you now. That voice inside you, it's not broken anymore. It's powerful. It's clear. It's no longer afraid of being misunderstood, because truth doesn't need to be shouted to be real, and dignity doesn't need permission to exist. So when you finally speak from power, what you're really saying is, I'm no longer shrinking myself to fit inside a connection that can't hold me. And you mean it. There's no revenge in your tone, no bitterness in your posture, just grace, just strength, just sovereignty. And in that moment, whether they realize it or not, you've already said the most powerful message of all. I see myself now, and that's all I ever needed. Let's get one thing straight right now. It's not confrontation that shakes an avoidant. It's not the arguments. It's not the desperate late night texts or the emotional monologues that beg for change. They're used to that. In fact, they've built emotional armor for it. They know how to pull away when the heat rises. They know how to disappear when the words get too real. They know how to dodge the fire because that's the only way they've ever learned how to survive. But you know what they can't dodge, what they can't build a shield against: clarity. See, when you confront someone, there's still hope in it. There's still emotion. There's still a thread that says, I want to fix this. But when you come with clarity, when you stop pushing, stop arguing, stop trying to open a door they keep slamming shut, that cuts deeper than any confrontation ever could. Because now, it's not about trying to be heard. It's not about getting them to understand. It's about you understanding yourself. And that's when things shift. Avoidants thrive in confusion. They're comfortable when everything's foggy, when you're doubting, questioning, spiraling. Because as long as you're unsure, they stay in control. But the second you bring clarity into the dynamic, you flip the script. You break the trance. You become untouchable. Because now, you're not reacting to their chaos, you're choosing your peace. And that peace, that unshakable knowing that says, this is not love. This is not what I want. I deserve better. That's the kind of clarity that cuts through their avoidance like a razor. They don't expect it. Because you're not slamming the door, You're simply walking through one they didn't know you saw. You're not yelling anymore. You're not justifying. You're done with the tug-of-war. You just stop. And that quiet, grounded clarity, it leaves them exposed because they can't twist it. They can't argue with it. They can't manipulate it into guilt or confusion. It's clean. It's sharp. It's done. And when you calmly say, this doesn't align with who I am anymore, when you look at the patterns and say, I'm no longer available for this dynamic, there's nothing left for them to control. See, clarity removes the drama they rely on. It removes the gray area they hide in. Because now, you're not playing chess with someone who only shows up when they feel like it. You've flipped the board and said, I'm not playing anymore. That moment changes everything. You're no longer trying to convince anyone to meet you at the level of love you offer. You're no longer stuck explaining basic emotional needs to someone who keeps acting like they're burdens. You're not raising your voice anymore. You're raising your standards, and that clarity doesn't just change how they see you, it changes how you see you, because now, you're not the one trying to force connection with someone who avoids intimacy. You're the one who finally said, if this requires me to abandon myself just to keep you, then it's not worth it. Let that sink in. You're not choosing the connection anymore. You're choosing you, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of truth. And when you show up in that kind of clarity, the avoidant can no longer pretend they don't know what's going on, because you've just shown them the mirror, without emotion, without drama, without fear, and what they see in that mirror is a version of you they never expected, one that no longer needs them, one that no longer tolerates breadcrumbs, one that finally sees through the game and chooses peace over potential. And that kind of clarity, that kind of inner resolve, that's the message they'll remember, not the confrontation, not the pleading, not the chaos, but the day you got crystal clear and never looked back. There's something avoidants fear more than closeness, more than conflict, more than being called out. They fear your emotional independence, not because they'll admit it. Most of them won't, but because when you no longer need them to feel whole, when your emotions stop depending on their presence, validation, or attention, you take away the control they didn't even realize they were holding. See, emotional independence isn't about acting like you don't care. It's not about cold detachment. It's not about playing games. It's about not letting their inconsistency, their distance, or their silence dictate your worth. It's about being rooted in yourself, so deeply, so firmly, that whether they stay or leave, you're still good, you're still whole, you're still grounded, and that's what shakes them, because avoidants thrive in one dynamic, you emotionally needing them while they emotionally withhold from you. That push-pull keeps them in power, that hot and cold rhythm lets them control the tempo of the relationship. They show up just enough to keep you hoping, and pull away just enough to keep you chasing. But when you shift that energy, when you stop needing their presence to feel safe, when your happiness, your peace, your confidence stops being something they can give or take away, you throw off their entire playbook. Because now, they don't know how to hold your attention, they don't know how to keep you hooked, they don't know how to make you question your value. Because you've stopped outsourcing it, you no longer break when they pull back. You don't spiral when they go silent. You don't wait by the phone, refreshing, overthinking, shrinking. You've unplugged, and that unplugging, that's liberation. It's the kind of shift that doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't need a long talk. It doesn't come with a dramatic exit. It comes with one internal decision. I no longer let your fear of closeness create instability in my life. And when that happens, you change everything, because now you're no longer emotionally chasing. You're not looking for their approval. You're not desperate for their attention. You've realized that emotional peace is not something you get from someone else. It's something you build within, and you did that through the silence, through the letdowns, through every time they made you feel like you were too much, too emotional, too intense. You used that pain and turned it into power. And now they feel the shift. They feel the emotional distance you used to fear giving them. They feel the calm you used to fight for. They feel the grounded energy of someone who no longer reacts, but responds with grace. They feel your presence, but only if they've earned it. That's what emotional independence gives you, the ability to choose who has access to you, not out of revenge, not out of ego, but from alignment with your truth. You're not holding space for people who keep disappearing. You're not pouring into cups that leak. You're not trying to fix someone who's committed to avoiding themselves. You've stepped into a version of you that no longer confuses pain for love, that no longer sees silence as mystery, that no longer tolerates emotional breadcrumbs just to feel seen, and the avoidant feels it. Even if they don't say a word, even if they pretend like nothing's changed, they feel the void where your emotional need used to be, and they don't know how to fill it. Because for once, you're no longer depending on them to feel okay, and that shakes the foundation, because when they can't control how you feel, they can't control how you show up. And now that you're not reacting, not chasing, not shrinking, they're the ones left wondering what happened. But you know what happened. You healed, you matured, you grew, and you finally understood that true power doesn't come from controlling another. It comes from mastering yourself. So while they may keep running from emotions you're no longer following, because you've found something they can't give you and something they fear the most, yourself, let's talk about something most people completely underestimate. You think the biggest move is confrontation. You think it's giving them a piece of your mind, letting it all out, holding them accountable, demanding to be seen. But here's the truth. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. No call, no text, no emotional display, just silence. And not the silence that's pretending to be strong while still hoping they reach out. Not the silence that's secretly screaming inside, but the kind of silence that comes from a deep, unshakable place of peace, where you've finally stopped playing the game, where you've stopped giving them the reaction they've used to control you, because let's be honest, avoidants aren't thrown off by your emotions. They've seen the crying, they've seen the explaining, they've seen the back and forth, the overthinking, the second chances, the door left half open just in case. That doesn't shake them. If anything, it feeds their distance, because they know they can pull back, and you'll come running. They know they can ignore you, and you'll keep knocking. They know they can be inconsistent, and you'll try harder to prove your worth. But when you stop reacting, when you truly stop, they feel something they've never had to sit with before, your power, because now the ball isn't in their court. There's no game to play, no tension to feed off, no emotions to dance around. Just a stillness that exposes the truth. You're not waiting for them anymore, and that absence of reaction, that rattles them more than anything you could ever say. Because now they're left with questions, now they're left without control, now they have to wonder, why aren't they chasing? Why aren't they asking what's wrong? Why aren't they reacting the way they used to? Because here's what most people miss. Your reaction was never just about emotion. It was a signal, a message that said you still have a hold on me. Even when you were upset, even when you were angry, you were still invested. But now your silence says something else entirely. It says, I'm not giving you access to my emotions anymore. It says, I'm not letting your avoidance dictate my value. It says, I see what this is, and I'm not playing my part in it anymore. And the most powerful part, you're not being silent to get a reaction from them. You're not manipulating energy. You're just done reacting. Because you've realized that your peace is not up for negotiation anymore. That's when the game ends. Because the avoidant doesn't know what to do when they can't trigger a response. They don't know how to control a dynamic where you're no longer emotionally invested. They don't know how to handle someone who's moved from reaction to clarity. And clarity. Real clarity isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's firm. It's quiet. It's clean. And it makes them sit with their own behavior in a way that no emotional reaction ever could. Because your reaction used to give them an exit. It gave them an excuse to focus on your emotion instead of their avoidance. It gave them a way out, but now there's nothing left to shift the blame toward. Just their own reflection, just their own patterns, and your silence forces them to feel it all. Because this time you didn't fight, you didn't chase, you didn't fold, you chose to stop showing up for a connection that only ever ran when it got real. You chose to walk away without drama, without revenge, without needing to be the last one heard. And that quiet, grounded walk away, that's what echoes, that's what they feel long after the silence begins. Because they're not used to people leaving without a war. They're not used to people rising instead of reacting. But that's exactly what You've done, and that's the message they can't unhear. There comes a day, it's not marked on a calendar, no one throws you a party, no one even notices it right away, but you do, because everything inside you shifts. It's the day you stop explaining yourself, and I'm not talking about giving someone the silent treatment out of spite or trying to manipulate a reaction. I'm talking about that soul, deep clarity where you realize that no amount of explaining is ever going to make someone see you if they're committed to misunderstanding you, especially someone who avoids closeness. The second things get real, you've explained yourself over and over again. You've tried to make them understand your heart, your intentions, your needs. You've written long messages. You've spoken calmly. You've cried. You've walked on eggshells trying to make it easy for them to hear you. But it was never about how gently or clearly you said it. They just weren't listening. Not because they couldn't hear, but because listening requires presence. It requires emotional availability. And when someone's guarded, they protect their world by shutting out any voice that threatens to reach truth. So for a long time, you kept thinking, maybe if I explain it better, maybe if I say it differently, maybe if I give them context or show them the hurt behind the words, they'll finally get it. But they didn't, because they weren't trying to get it, and then one day, without warning, something inside you just stops. You feel the urge rise maybe to write another message, or have that one last talk, but this time you don't follow it. You sit in it, you breathe through it, and you realize, I'm done explaining myself to people who aren't willing to meet me where I am, and that's the day everything begins to change, because explaining yourself from a place of self-worth looks nothing like trying to explain yourself from a place of desperation. One is communication, the other is chasing, and you're done chasing. When you stop explaining, you reclaim your power, because you finally realize that your clarity doesn't require their agreement. Your truth doesn't need their approval. Your standards are not up for negotiation. You see, explaining kept you tethered. It kept you in the dynamic, because as long as you were still explaining, you were still hoping, still trying to get them to understand so that maybe, just maybe, they'd show up the way you needed. But the day you stop explaining, you stop waiting, you stop hoping, you stop handing out permission slips for your own worth. And here's the part that's wild, that's when they finally start to reflect. Because silence makes space, not empty space, but sacred space. The kind of space where the other person is finally left alone with nothing but their own thoughts and the version of you that no longer needs to be understood. That's when they start asking questions they never asked before. Did I push too far? Why aren't they reaching out? Why did they stop trying? And that reflection only happens because you stopped explaining. You stopped filling the silence. You stopped chasing clarity from someone who never gave it to you. They feel the weight of your absence more than the volume of your voice, because your silence now holds more truth than your words ever did. And they begin to realize, maybe for the first time, that the version of you who kept showing up, who kept trying to repair, who kept softening her truth just to be heard, that version is gone, not in anger, not in spite, but in growth. They're left with the mirror you stopped holding. And now they have to look at themselves, whether they ever admit it to you or not, whether they come back or disappear again. The silence you gave them forced them to sit with something they spent their whole life running from accountability, and that's what rattles them, because the most confronting truth they'll ever face isn't something you said, it's what you stopped saying, and that day you stopped explaining yourself, that was the day you finally remembered who you are. If this message hit, you don't just sit with it, act on it. Hit that subscribe button if you're done playing small. Share this with someone who needs to wake up. This is Tony Style Motivation, where silence becomes strength, pain becomes fuel, and your comeback becomes unstoppable. Until next time, stay bold, stay grounded, and never chase what you were born to rise above.